Okay, so this story comes from Moosehead Lake, Maine. And honestly, it's just one of those true crime stories that feels like it should be a movie. There's romance, betrayal, pregnancy, a lake, and a murder. And that still haunts people a century later. So let's start with Grace Brown. She was 20 years old, working in a skirt factory in New York. Imagine a small town girl with big dreams. And she wanted more than the factory life. But she was also young, trusting, and unfortunately vulnerable. Then enters Chester Gillette, the nephew of the factory owners. And he's wealthy, well dressed, charming, the kind of guy that could sweep someone off their feet in an instant. Grace fell for him, and from what the records show, she truly believed he cared for her. But here's the thing, Chester had no intentions of marrying Grace, especially after she became pregnant. Now let's pause for a second. Think about the social pressures in 1906. A pregnancy out of wedlock could ruin a woman's life. Grace's desperation is easy to understand. She was trying to secure a future, and Chester was supposed to be her protector. But he wasn't. Instead, he manipulated her, ignored her letters, and tried to avoid responsibility. By the summer of 1906, Grace finally decided to confront him. Chester invited her on a trip to Big Moose Lake in northern Maine. The lake itself is stunning, remote, quiet, surrounded by forests, the kind of place you'd go to escape life for a week. And it seems innocent enough until it's not. Grace and Chester checked into the hotel called Arrowhead, where he even registered under a fake name, Carl Graham. Already we're seeing the first red flag. Chester knew what he was doing. He was setting a stage. They spent a few days together, and everyone thought it was a simple summer trip. But tensions were building. Grace's letters had been increasingly emotional, pleading for him to take responsibility. Chester, on the other hand, was detached, irritable, and evasive. He didn't want to be tied down. On July 11th, 1906, Chester rented a canoe for the two of them. Witnesses saw them leaving the dock, paddling into the center of the lake, and from the outside it looked normal, a couple enjoying the sun. But inside that canoe, we know things were tense, desperate, and terrifying for Grace. Hours later, Grace's body was discovered floating in the lake. She had bruises on her body and head injuries, and it became clear that this was no accident. Chester had killed her, and he tried to make it look like it drowned by accident, but investigations quickly uncovered evidence that contradicted his story. So after Grace's body was found, the investigation really picked up. Authorities began piecing together her last days, her letters, and her interactions with Chester. And honestly, it's heartbreaking to read her letters. She was terrified, pleading for him to do the right thing, but he ignored her. He treated her like a problem to be avoided rather than a human being he had responsibility towards. Now, the investigators had a challenge. Chester had tried to create an accident, but there were clues. The bruises on Grace, inconsistencies in Chester's story, and witness accounts all started pointing toward foul play. People who had interacted with Chester noted he was unusually nervous, trying to stay ahead of the investigation. During this time, the newspapers picked up the story. And when I say newspapers, I mean the whole country was obsessed. This wasn't just a Maine story anymore. It was a story about class, betrayal, and the tragedy of a young woman's life cut short. Newspaper headlines screamed about love, deceit, and murder on the lake. People were horrified, but they couldn't look away. Kind of like us today. Fast forward to the trial. Chester Gillette was charged with second-degree murder. Courtroom sketches and newspaper articles from the time describe him as pale, withdrawn, and trying to maintain an image of composure. Meanwhile, the letters from Grace were read aloud. Imagine hearing the words of someone pleading for their life, their love, and a future. It's intense and completely chilling. Testimonies painted a damning picture. Chester's charm and wealth didn't protect him in court. Witnesses described how he had been avoiding responsibility, lying about his intentions, and manipulating Grace right up to the end. The jury didn't take long to convict. Chester was sentenced to death, and in 1908 he was executed by the electric chair. But the story doesn't end here. The lake itself became part of the legend. Big Moose Lake is huge, remote, and quiet, perfect for a tragic story to linger. People say if you paddle on certain parts of the lake, especially near the spots Chester and Grace were last seen together, there's an eerie feeling. Some locals whisper that Grace's spirit still lingers, a reminder of the cruelty and betrayal she suffered. Looking back at this story, it's not just about murder. It's about trust, social pressures, and the devastating impact of selfish choices. Grace trusted Chester. He betrayed her. And that lake, as calm and beautiful as it is, became a witness to one of the most tragic love stories in Maine's history. Now, I have to say, when I think about it, it's chilling, and I think that's part of why the story has stayed with people over 100 years. It's easy to read it like a headline, young woman murdered at lake, but the deeper you go, the letters, the desperation, the planning, you realize how human, tragic, and intense it really is. So if you ever visit Moosehead Lake, take a moment and think about this story. Imagine paddling through the serene water, knowing the history beneath the surface. It's a reminder that sometimes the prettiest places can hide the darkest secrets. If you thought this story was wild, make sure to like, share, and follow for more true crime, history, and mysteries. And I want to hear from you. Do you think Chester really thought he could get away with it, or did he panic and just make everything worse? Let me know in the comments. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.